wondered why Americans use a different measurement system than the entire world? Well, we use the imperial system, the rest of the world uses the metric system. We use the imperial system every day for almost everything, but we barely know the history of it. The measurement system is used by every country except the US. Many people ask why, but never actually delve too far into it, so I will for them. I have knowledge of both systems and actually use both of them on a weekly basis, switching sides like a double agent. Additionally, I have experience in construction and map laying, which uses the measurement system. I am here to inform you of the history of the imperial system, the differences between both systems, and the reasons why Americans use that system. The imperial system used to be the king of measurements, literally. It was founded in medieval Europe, but it was called Winchester rather than imperial. All the measurements were used regularly, including foot, gallon, and pound. In the 16th century, the rod was defined as a unit of measurement as well. A rod is 5.5 yards or 16.5 feet, and was defined as the length of the left foot of 16 men lined up heel to toe as they emerged from church, because after all, medieval Europe is very religious, and they had to have a unit of measurement for that somehow. Later, they also added the acre and the furlong, which is 1/8 of a mile. Europe birthed the imperial system, and Britain also refined it. The Weights and Measurements Act of 1824 and the Act of 1878 established the British imperial system. They tampered with old measurements to make them more precise and prettier than before. While they modified and improved the Winchester systems, America adopted the same system in the 19th century. The standard U.S. gallon is based on the Queen Anne wine gallon and is 17% smaller than the new British imperial gallon. We still use the old Winchester version, but we have called it the imperial system, while Europe has adopted the metric system. The rival of the imperial system was also birthed by the rival of Britain, France. The French Revolution of 1789 had provided a good time to replace the confusing welter of thousands of traditional units, instead replacing them with multiples of 10. In 1791, the French National Assembly directed the French Academy of Sciences to address the chaotic state of France measurements. Eventually, French scientists found a value of 39.4 inches to equal a meter, the basis for their measurement system. By 1795, all metric units were made from the meter, including the gram and the liter. And in 1799, the meter and kilograms of archives declared that the metric system was to be used by all of France. The motto for the metric system was also made: for all people, for all time. In 1875, an international conference met in Paris to establish an International Bureau of Weights and Measurements. There, they set up a laboratory where international standards are kept, national copies inspected, and metrological research conducted. Every 6 years, a group of 40 countries meets there to discuss whether reform is necessary. In the 20th century, the metric system generated systems needed in science and technology to express physical properties more complicated than simple length, weight, and volume. The imperial system and the metric both have their strengths and weaknesses. The imperial system started out as a reliable measuring system. The first one. It offered people a way to measure their belongings when things were so hard already. Through the ages, it has grown and adapted to have more units to measure with. However, the units didn't make that much sense when the Middle Ages were over 300 years ago. The unit for a bushel and a rod, or even a foot, were off because of how outdated they were. It was eventually updated, but still confused people with the random numbers, and in fact still does today. Meanwhile, the metric system tries to solve that problem. The base numbers for the metric system are based on units of 10. Every single type of measurement has the same amount of units with the same prefix, like kilo, other things I can't think of right now. The one disadvantage the metric system had was that it was new compared to the imperial system. People were used to the old system of measurements and disregarded the new system entirely. With time, however, countries would rely on the metric system, with only America being stubborn and refusing to change. Speaking of America, the 13 colonies were discovered by the British, and as such, they used the imperial system. Even when they won the Revolutionary War, Thomas Jefferson realized that they would probably have to pay endorsement fees for France's metric system. Also, the relationship between the two countries dwindled after the war. There was a thought of change in 1821 when John Adams saw that 22 states used the imperial system. They called it the U.S. customary system, and it worked well enough and required no changes. We even thought that, if we were to use the metric system during Napoleon's downfall, it might falter. You learned how the imperial and metric system throughout the ages, the differences between them, and how and why we use it today. The imperial system was the first to be born and was used as the primary measurement for 300 years. Then, France decided to make a new system that wasn't as confusing with the measurements. Most countries seem to think that the metric system is better, but we still stay with the imperial system. Nowadays, it's a mystery as to why, because of wars and paranoia about France, aren't around today. Now you know why the metric system is used around the world and why we use a completely different one.